and this is termed the X allele. People with the X allele will have disorganized fast-twitch muscle fibers. So at the elite level, many studies have found that the R allele is considerably overrepresented, and the X allele is considerably underrepresented, which comes really as no surprise. So the R allele confers a competitive advantage. And here's what it looks like in the normal general population, the allele spread. Here's what it looks like with the UWSP sprinters. As you can see, it is in line with what you see at the elite level. The XX allele is considerably underrepresented, and the RR allele is considerably overrepresented. So let me take this analysis a step farther, just as we did for A's. We compared an individual's gene alleles in comparison with their race times. And from this, we made this box and whisker plot here. The RR individuals are in red, blue are RX, and the gray is the XX. Unfortunately, we did not have enough XX individuals, so we cannot make a comparison like we wanted to between the R allele carriers and the XX individuals. So instead, we took a novel approach that no one really has done before, and we compared RR individuals to RX individuals. And what we found was quite surprising. We found that RR individuals actually do outperform RX individuals for the shortest distance races, the most explosive ones. It's in the 60 and the 100, and already by the 200, you see the performance gap is narrowed. It's because the 60 and the 100 are the most explosive races that are out there for track. And to put this data in perspective, the difference you see at the 6-meter dash, that 3% performance advantage, is the difference between first place at the Olympics and not even qualifying for that race. And not only this, as you can see, as you go up in distance, the actin 3 gene is no longer a predictor of success. It's because it is just for that initial sprint, that very short amount of race distance. So what we found is that RR individuals indeed are more present, and it confers a competitive advantage. In summary, the ACE and actin 3 genes are associated with elite performance. Individuals who have this at the elite level are much more likely to compete better than those with the bad genes. We hypothesized that this same phenomenon observed at the elite level would be observed at the D3 level. And indeed, this is what we found. Not only were the beneficial alleles more prevalent, but they also correlated to faster race times. In conclusion, the ACE gene predisposes an individual for endurance success, and the actin 3 gene predisposes an individual for sprinting success. In the future, we would like to expand our study to many other colleges and their track teams in order to further support our conclusion and our findings. Someday, we will be able to test your genes and know which sports and events you are most likely to succeed in. I hope you now understand, for at least partially from a genetic standpoint, why some people run faster than others. And the moral of this story is, if you want to be fast, you need to choose the right parents. Thank you.
Box and whisker plots brings back all those dissertation years and all those plots that I did. Anyway, having said that, congratulations, very nice talks. Our third presentation is actually 3 people, but Blake Marlowe will be our speaker, and also Jordan Strait and Ryan Bottom were involved in this. And this is with faculty mentor Lee Willis. Lee's over there hiding in the corner. And the title of their poster was Receptive Africans and the Settlement of Liberia.
I guess they all 3 are presenting. Yes. I have only one underline here.
So as you said, I'm Blake Marlowe.
I'm Ryan Bottom.
And I'm Jordan Strait.
And our project is about recaptive Africans and the settlement of Liberia. If you don't know what recaptive Africans are, you're in the right place. So just a quick overview of what we'll be talking about. We have our introduction, before colonization, trade in children, and the execution of Nathaniel Gordon. And just a quick note, this research is part of a larger project headed up by our fearless leader, Lee Willis, about recaptive Africans post-1808. So let's just jump right in. So a quick background, our story begins with the Act of 1807. So Congress banned further importation of Africans into the United States, which took effect in January 1st, 1808, and also made it so that no Americans can participate So after this ban, you saw the emergence of the illegal slave trade. And during this, between 1808 and 1865, approximately 60,000 more Africans were introduced into the South. Now, recaptive Africans are those that were attempted to be smuggled into the United States, but were recaptured by the U.S. government. And so during this period, you had the question of what to do with these people who were recaptured. Now, they found a bit of a solution, put that in quotation marks for now, with the creation of Liberia. So in the 1810s, the American Colonization Society, which was a northern society of New England Quakers and abolitionists, were looking to create a colony in Africa to resettle free blacks. And eventually, the United States government paired up with this American Colonization Society to start sending these recaptive Africans to this new nation. And as time went on, you kind of had this issue where you had free blacks, recaptive Africans, and native Africans who were from this area, as you can see up on the northern western coast of Africa, that all had different languages, different cultures, and that created some tension over the years. Now, before the creation of Liberia, you had legal slave trade. Legal slave trade going on in Texas and Florida was a cute, very popular avenue for slavers to smuggle these Africans into the United States. And both at the time were Spanish territories that were sparsely populated, so it made it very easy to kind of bring these slaves over them. And at the time, immediately after 1808, the enforcement of the ban was left to the states. So in the case that these slavers were captured, they would be carried to the nearest state district court and tried. And in a lot of these cases, all of these cases, they were tried in the Deep South. So that presented a problem because these courts were in charge of dealing with the slavers, punishing them, and also disposing of the cargo. And the way that a lot of these states would dispose of the cargo was by selling the Africans at auction. And the benefit of these sales would go to the state and also the agent of the government who was involved in capturing the slavers initially. Now, this practice would end with the passage of the Act of 1819, where the U.S. Congress decided to give the jurisdiction over enforcing the ban to the federal government and decided that all Africans were to be excluded from the United States if they were attempted to be smuggled in illegally, and would send all of them to Liberia thereafter.
Okay. With the Act of 1819, the U.S. Navy, well, the U.S. and British navies both patrolled the Atlantic coastlines, and the seas, or the ocean as well. And when they did this, they posed a problem because with the ban of the slave trade, this only gave the pirates, if you will, that were smuggling the Africans in just more of an incentive to be more creative in how they shipped the Africans. And one of the ways that they did that is they got more children because they were easier to hide. So, where are we here? Yeah, so they increasingly used children. One of the terms, one of the scholars that I found was, he used the term tight packing. And with smaller children, you were able to have more of them on the ships themselves. The most prominent captures of ships that we came across were the captures of the Erie and the Storm King in 1860, and almost half of the Africans on board that ship were women and children, primarily children. And the capture of the Ponds, which is one of the more interesting ones that I came across, most of the Africans were between the ages of 8 and 18, and most of them were later delivered to Monrovia. And I also came across some letters from somebody who was in Monrovia, and they just described the incredibly awful conditions that, as we all know, the slaves were subjected to when they were being shipped over. And they mentioned that even after they were disembarked off of the ship, more and more just died.
And so the end of our research led us to Nathaniel Gordon. He was a slaver who got caught. He talked about the Erie. He got caught in 1860. It's important to know that before, with the enforcement of the 1808 ban, it wasn't actually that enforced. A lot of this has to do with the fact that America didn't necessarily pass this act wholeheartedly. There was a lot of international pressure from people, especially Britain, who was America's most important trade partner at the time. And so, as you can imagine, in the years leading up to the Civil War, these tensions and kind of this pressure was increased. A lot of it having to do with Lincoln wanting to set a precedence and kind of enforce and show that America was against slavery. So in August of 1860, the Erie was captured by the USS Mohican off the coast of the Congo River. They had only been on board the ship for about a day before they were captured. There were 900 Africans on board, and the vast majority of them were women and children. They were sent to Monrovia for the Liberian government to deal with, and Nathaniel Gordon, who was the ship's captain, was sent to New York and detained for trial. So he was from Maine, but he was sent to New York to be tried alongside other captured slavers. And as I said before, the Civil Era tensions led to this push for really harsh punishment. And in 1861, he was convicted of piracy. And then on February 7th of 1862, he was hanged. He was the first and only slaver to be executed by the United States. Another important thing to note about this is that also with Lincoln and how he's trying to enforce this was he kind of did this clandestine sort of act with England, which allowed them to actually capture ships that were suspected for slavery. And that also was kind of something of a breaking point for the South. They were infuriated by it. A lot of it having to do with states' rights versus the federal government rights, because according to them, Lincoln should not have gone out and done this. And so the problem with the problem with this in Nathaniel Gordon is that he and his ship, the Erie, and the Storm King were both captured the same day. So along with his 900 slaves and also the Storm King's additional 600 slaves, that was 1,500 slaves who were sent to Liberia for the Liberian government to deal with. The majority of them, as we said before, were women and children, so they were really hard to place. At least men you could send to work, but women and children you had to place in households, you had to feed, you had to clothe, you had to provide for them. And so that created some tensions between the US government and Liberia, because Liberia was kind of getting sick of having to deal with all the slaves or recaptured slaves that were being sent to them. And that is where our research ended.
Thank you for listening. We do encourage you to check out our poster afterwards if you'd like to know more. There's obviously quite a bit of information to cover, but that's about it. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Blake, Jordan, and Ryan. I apologize, I didn't realize all three of you. Our fourth presentation is from Laura Brickman. And Laura has worked with Jennifer Collins, I think that was here, and John Blakeman, political science. And the title of her talk and her poster is Cross-National Determinants of Participation in Voting.
All right. I want to start off by saying thank you to Professor Collins and Professor Blakeman for all their help this semester. It has been a long time coming, and it's nice to finally wrap things up. My title of the research is Cross-National Determinants of Participation and Voting. Basically, it's a correlational relationship between voters' interest in politics with voter turnout across 5 democracies. I chose this topic because I was fascinated by the World Values Survey, a study that I learned about in Political Science 203. It is a study that started in University of Michigan and has expanded out across the globe. And they do waves of studies and just great research that I just wanted to get out there and grab onto and look at all this data that is out there to explore and get some more information about the people around us and across the globe. And then the other reason is voter turnout is on the decline. Everybody in the scholarly world is asking, why is it on the decline? Is it psychological? Is it psychosocial? Is it socioeconomic factors? Everybody's asking why, but nobody can seem to come up with an answer. So I wanted to somehow see if I can come up with some kind of answer to this question as to why is voter turnout on the decline. With my study, the 5 countries that I examined were Germany, Mexico, Sweden, the UK, and the United States. Each of these are representative of levels of development from really, really low to really, really high, such as Sweden. They all have a little bit of difference in political systems, from proportional representation, which is where they go in and basically meet a threshold to get on the ballot, versus single-member district, which we have here, where it's the winner-take-all method that voters have to win on the ballot. And then my independent variables I took from that World Values Survey I mentioned previously. It is a survey that has over 200 questions of data that you can take from and just examine. And this study that I conducted was from Wave 5, which was 2005 to 2009. I chose this selection of years because the Wave 6 was not yet completed based on the countries that I wanted to examine, because I wanted the levels of development variance, and I wanted a variety of democracy styles as well. With these independent variables, the questions that I chose were the level of importance of politics, how much freedom the respondent felt, however they interpreted freedom at the time of the survey, self-positioning on the political scale, left, right, middle, confidence in the government, confidence in Parliament, or we call it Congress here, and then the importance of democracy. These are all chosen for their relativity towards political interest, while being limited to the World Values Survey data and questions from that study. On the very obvious dependent variable would be voter turnout. I took the voter turnout data from 2005 to 2010 to match the Wave 5 study from the World Values Survey. From the data that I took, because I took 2 to 3 voter turnout data from that time span from each of the 5 democracies, and then use the average from each of those voter turnouts from each respective democracy. I know it's a lot of math and it's hard to get through all this, so bear with me. And I did that because I wanted to use a little bit less data, but focus in on what exactly the voter turnout was for each respective democracy. As you'll see on my poster later, Sweden was in fact the highest, and Mexico was the lowest, while the United States was pretty low on the spectrum as well, even with 2008 being a really high voter turnout.